All right, Nate, who
Yeah.
are your two teams?
All right. Let's see. And by the way, I did pick the Oilers on that one, so
All
they
right,
move on
Oilers have advanced.
to the next round. So let's see who I will get for my next couple teams. Gonna pull up the wheel here. It should
Still got the
still be
Cowboys.
saved with our old team, with what we were doing before. So we only have 14 teams left. And I will get Washington. Wonderful. Of course, they weren't called the Commanders at this time. You want to tell me what the team was called back then?
Sorry, my
They were
connection's going out. This the Washington. This would be a
they were
rough way to
the
get canceled if we ever make it and someone's like, they hosted a podcast where they debated the Super Bowl champion in 1977, and they said the slur. Oh, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, so tell me about the Washington Commanders, Nathaniel, and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
well, it goes without saying that 1970s football, you cannot talk about it in any way, any shape or form without talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, they won 4 Super Bowls in the decade, absolutely pulled themselves out of the depths of the NFL. So the way we think about the Cleveland Browns or the New York Jets or the Tennessee Titans now, that's how the Pittsburgh Steelers were up until the 1970s. They had been in the NFL. They were one of the first NFL teams back in the 30s, and they were pitiful. They might have made the. I don't know if they ever made the postseason, to be quite honest with you. Throughout their first 40, 35 years of their existence. But then in the 70s, they come out of nowhere, and they have Terry Bradshaw. They got Franco Harris. They have the Steel Curtain defense, right? Like one of the NFL's greatest dynasties ever. So I absolutely, it's hard to write them off. But 1977, of all the 70s Pittsburgh Steelers teams, this is one of, like, if you had to rank them in order, this might be their worst one or one of the worst ones. Um, their offense, 7th in scoring, so not too bad, but their defense, 17th in points allowed. So really an off year for the Steelers in terms of that. They rank outside the top 10 in terms of pass defense. They do rank in top 10 in pass defense in rush defense and rush offense. So pretty solid on that front. They are scoring still a lot of points. I mean, they actually beat the Cowboys when they faced them in a preview of the next year's Super Bowl. The Steelers host the Cowboys and beat them 28-13. So they were not a bad team. Obviously, they make the playoffs, but they end up losing to the eventual Super Bowl winning. I mean, the AFC Championship game winning Denver Broncos, which I gotta imagine, like, at the time was like, whoa, this Broncos team is able to pull this off. Crazy. Terry Bradshaw actually throws more interceptions than touchdowns this year. So I'm talking a lot of smack, sort of, about the Steelers, but I think it's just because of what they had built across the decade and what they would do just the next year after this is so amazing that that this year does seem a little off. Only 9-5, right? In this 14-game season, they lose 5 games, which in some divisions is not good enough to win. And I mean, the Miami Dolphins went 10-4 and they missed the playoffs, and then you have the Steelers here. I'm sure there were some newspaper writings in Miami that were not too fond of the way the NFL had things set up at the time, but Steelers do make the playoffs and they end up winning. Now they play Washington. Now the one I have to argue against them is Washington, who are in the NFC East with the team that eventually went to the Super Bowl. Now Washington finished with the same exact record as Pittsburgh did this year. It's pretty interesting. For Washington, though, their offense was really what let them down. Their defense was really good. This is still when they had George Allen, who is one of the most well-respected, well-known coaches of the 1970s, and he had this philosophy. Don't know if you know much about George Allen, that he did not like young players. Like, all of the players that he wanted on his team were really old. I've never really gone back to fact check this, but apparently he would trade all of his draft picks. That seems a little outrageous, but so I'm sure he traded a lot of his draft picks, not literally all of them. But you go watch NFL Network shows from when I was growing up, and that's stuff they would say. So this this team around this time was known as the Over the Hill Gang because of that. So one thing about the Over the Hill Gang is they would start the season off strong. So right here, Washington started off with a 3-1 record, but then those older players can't really keep up with the longevity of the season, right? They played 14 whole games in 1977, so by the end of the year, they're kind of out of it. They were 6-5 by Thanksgiving. They lose to the Cowboys 14-7 on Thanksgiving Day, and so by then they're pretty much out of the playoff hunt. But they do end up winning the last 3 games of the year, so they do finish with the same record as the Steelers. They got Billy Kilmer as their quarterback. They got a young Joe Theismann kind of backing him up just before he's ready to take the reins, but it really is their offense that lets them down. But I guess the answer here, the question here is Washington versus Pittsburgh. Who do you got? They both finished with a similar record. I guess I shouldn't try to persuade you in any way. I mean, I guess that's what it is, right? It's a debate, but I don't know if I'm supposed to give the pick, but if I was the one on the other side of this, I would just viewing these numbers, I think I would do something a little controversial here and pick the non-playoff team to advance in this one. But what do you think?
Well,
I'm sharing the wheel again. I don't know. I keep doing this.
Unlike so many branches of our federal government, I will not be swayed by your executive power on this here election. And I will put to death the Over the Hill Gang. And my reason being is the quarterback situation on both teams. On one side, it's Terry Bradshaw. On the other, it's Kilmer, who also has Joe Theismann getting some starts throughout the season. But the reason why I'm going for the Steelers is because, yeah, they had the same record, but this was a Washington team where you watched the vibes during the weekend, the weekly recaps. It felt like they were never a true Super Bowl contender, whereas the Steelers kind of had that feeling the entire season up until it became clear it was a Broncos, Cowboys, Baltimore Colts race to the Super Bowl. So that's why I'm going with the Steelers. But you made a compelling case about the Over the Hill Gang, and I just was so fascinated about them. And I know this was a couple years after their prime as that defense, but I wanted to share with you what I found based on what you were saying. And I looked at the Pro Football Reference roster, and funny enough, there are more first-round picks from other teams on the Washington roster than from Washington themselves. Nate, if you look at their roster, all positions, backup starters, there's only one first-round pick that Washington drafted on that roster. That's wide receiver Charlie Taylor in 1964. I believe, yeah, that is correct. If you go onto the roster and you do that search bar, that's unbelievable. And in terms of the ages, the most crazy age on that defensive line is Ron McDowell this year. As a starter, he's 38 years old. And the rest of the ages are essentially like mid-30s to mid-20s. And then in terms of the whole roster, there's also the 38-year-old quarterback Billy Kilmer, who you mentioned, a couple of 36-year-olds, and a 37-year-old defensive back. So, phenomenal story, but I have to put the Over the Hill Gang to rest, Nate. It's time to unplug the cord.
It's time they are officially over the hill. Crazy thing I just saying about Ron McDowell, it looks like he had 2 interceptions that year, which, like, as a defensive end, is absolutely insane to think about. Like, 1 interception, like, sure, you get lucky, a ball tips in there, but 2, that's kind of crazy.
I must have just saw the highlight and not processed it in the moment, because I gotta say, like, the highlights are glorious. It's the best part of this project has been going back and rewatching those highlights, and I feel like I would have remembered a Fat Boy touchdown, but across all 15 weeks of highlights, I don't recall watching Ron McDowell score that thick six.
I don't think he scored a touchdown. He just had an interception. My bad.
But still, right? That should have stuck out like a sore thumb. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe it just maybe that happened a lot more often back then, and they were just not impressed by it. So, fair enough. I think you have a good point on why you would pick the Steelers there. But Washington, if there was an expanded postseason back then, they would have definitely been in it, and maybe would have been able to do a little more damage.
All right. Well, who are the next two teams? Who are my Warriors?
Who you get. Your Commanders are going to be...
Ah, damn Cowboys. Ooh, the Bears. Okay.
All
And
right.
who's the other one?
You get the Bears and... the 49ers.
Okay. Well, we'll start with the San Francisco 49ers. When you look at their record, 5-9, you compare that with the Chicago Bears, they're 9-5. 49ers team, man, not much to write home about. Like, the one thing I can think of, and it's my one bias, is the quarterback situation with Jim Plunkett. You know, that's a guy who was a veteran, has had some success, would go on to have even greater success. A respectable quarterback at that position, but man, Nate, you look at that roster, no offensive skill player jumps out of you on the 49ers, and you move over to the defense, and there were some quality players, but this was just kind of a middling, forgettable NFC West team. Every year, there's about 6 teams that you just don't really think about. In 1977, Nate, the San Francisco 49ers were one of those teams. You know who you couldn't keep your mind off of? Walter Payton. Watching his runs in these highlight videos, it was borderline pornographic. I mean, it was artistic. My mouth agape with the classical music, watching sweetness cut through. Walter Payton alone, worth the price of admission. He was the MVP of the year. He had 1,852 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns. Put Walter Payton on the field alone, he beats the 49ers. I rest my case.
Yeah, I mean, well said. I think Walter Payton on his own, on any team he was with, would definitely win any argument that they're in. You know, you hear the name, you hear the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. I think it's understated a little bit just how amazing he was. And I think you're right. You watch those highlights, and although they're in slow motion, and for some reason, like they are, he was just so dynamic every time he got the ball, and the stats show it. Especially for this era, again, 14 game seasons, and he's able to put up 1,800 yards. Absolutely ridiculous. If he had 2 extra games, I think there's no question he would have gone over 2,000. He was the MVP that season, right? He was an all-pro player. He won Offensive Player of the Year, well-deserved. And, you know, it's kind of funny, when I was looking at this team earlier, just a very quick glance, I kind of, for some ridiculous reason, forgot Walter Payton was on the Bears in 1977. I was like, how the heck did this team make the playoffs? They're 13th in scoring. They're 19th in scoring defense. Defensive yards, they're 22nd. They lost a game to the Oilers 47-0. Like, this isn't really a team that you would think should make the playoffs, but Walter Payton, I mean, all on his own, really was able to do it. They got creamed by the Cowboys in the playoffs, but if the matchup was in fact against the 49ers, who started the season 0-5, and were kind of a mess and kind of a forgetful team, like you said, throughout this year, there's no question in my mind the Bears would win the matchup.
All right. So, what do we got next? It's Dallas Cowboys still on the table, you know, still available.
We have waited a while to get rid of them. And
the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still there.
Yeah, but both of those teams are going to be absolutely a thrill to talk about.
Yes, one is a little better than the other. Oh no, which one is it?
Buccaneers.
Oh man, if we call this, I'm gonna be so ecstatic.
And then you're gonna have to be the one who picks. So then you're gonna pick the Buccaneers over the Cowboys.
Oh man, I would lose my credibility. I wouldn't. We're
not. We're gonna get the Giants. It looks.
I can't believe one of these two teams is gonna have to advance. Oh man, this is incredible. Okay.
Oh man,
I can't wait to hear these cases.
What can be said that hasn't already been said about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of 1977? You know, there is like points in my life where I can like think of things that have made me interested in finding out information about other things. And when I first learned about the Buccaneers' 0-26 start to their franchise's history, I feel like that was my first rabbit hole as a sports fan, to keep learning, like, why was this team so bad? How in the world are you that pathetic? And every time I read about this team, every time I see highlights or stuff about this team, I learn more information, and every part of it is just an absolute thrill. There's a book that I've been reading over the course of like a year since I bought it, because I'm pretty bad at actually following through with reading books, and it's called The Yucks, and it follows this team from 1976 to 1977, and absolutely a thrill to read. I would definitely recommend it. Maybe I'll send it to you once I finish it in 3 years. Yeah, but more on this actual 1977 team. I mean, the worst scoring offense, one of the worst scoring offenses in NFL history. This is coming off the 76 season where they finished 0-14, and John McKay, the Buccaneers head coach, really all he does is make sarcastic comments, says things like, when he's asked, what do you think about your offensive line's execution, he says he's in favor of it. He's asked about why he sits on the back of planes, and he says, well, I've never seen a plane hit a mountain ass first. So he's an absolute ridiculous human being that is coaching an NFL team. Of course, he had a lot of legacy at USC when he was the head coach there. He really is a big fan of O.J. Simpson, because he coached him in college, and a lot of times he's asked about, like, who do you wish you had on your team or what, and he always brings up O.J. Simpson. Apparently he would like carry a picture of him around because he missed him, and he liked to remind himself that at one point he was an actual coach. I kind of worry maybe the kind of pressure or psyche that he put O.J. Simpson in, maybe that contributed to something that happened a couple decades later. But
this guy's
anyway,
batshit insane. I can't believe he's that. Who carries a picture of a former player? Who carries a picture of anybody? You know? That's an absurd story. I mean, Nate, I can't believe you had all of that in your back pocket.
Oh man,
ready to go. I have to applaud that.
I love this team. I think absolutely.
I don't want them to die.
But I will say that I feel like the story is so comical that it tested me to try to find information that we don't hear about, because I feel like the Buccaneers story is so overblown. I mean, the NFL Films does a new special on it every 2 or 3 years, and it's like, okay, we've heard from the same guys tell us about how they sucked, or how at the end of the regular season literally everybody had their suitcases in their cars so they could just go home, or how they had literally a UPS driver like practicing on their field at some point because they were literally out of players because everybody was so hurt, because John McKay made them work out and what's it called, practice so hard during the season that they had literally more players on IR than they had touchdowns in the season. Just an absolutely crazy story. But the 1977 team, it took them until week 5 to score their first offensive touchdown. So they did somehow score a defensive touchdown in week 3 against, of all teams, the Dallas Cowboys. They lost that game 23-7. But apparently the Buccaneers in that game were talking smack and talking trash to the Cowboys. And one of the players actually ripped Tony Dorsett's helmet off and like punched him in the nose or something, which is crazy to do when you're on a franchise that's literally never won a game, playing against the team that would win the Super Bowl that year. But regardless, they go off. They are shut out not once, not twice, not 3 times. They are shut out 6 times in 6 games in this 14-game season. Just an absolutely pathetic, pitiful offense. But their defense, believe it or not, has improved from 1976. They've moved from last in the league to 12th in the league. So there's a lot of improvement there. They have Leroy Selman, who they were big on, and they drafted in 1976, and he's turned out to be a star defensive player and would later become, obviously, emerge into a Hall of Fame player for them. But believe it or not, the story does end for the Buccaneers in their ginormous losing streak near the end of the season. They play Hank Stram's New Orleans Saints and win on the road 33-14. When they come home to Tampa Bay, there's a huge party for them because they ended the streak and they finally got their first win. And they double it up by beating the Cardinals in the final game of the season, 17-7. And both of these teams that they beat were so embarrassed by this that they both fired their coaches. Meanwhile, John McKay got to keep his job, and in 2 years, he had the Buccaneers in the NFC Championship game somehow.
What?
Yeah, the Buccaneers played in an NFC Championship game 2 years after this.
With this team? That's unbelievable because you watch the highlights and they just don't even seem like they belong. Like, they stick out as an expansion team. They play like you would imagine one would look like, whereas the Seahawks weren't as bad as the Buccaneers were. I can't believe within 2 years. I look forward to us one day getting 1979. The Bucs are so bad. You went like 7 minutes on them. Meanwhile, the Giants are in like a corner being like, please don't analyze me and look at my warts. What's your take on the Giants?
You know, the Giants are just a run-of-the-mill bad team. They have a guy whose name is sort of like John McKay's. It's John McVay. It's literally like one letter off. So I gotta imagine that there were probably points in his career where he got confused as being the other guy, and he's like, "Hey, we're not that bad. I mean, we're the New York Giants, but we're not that bad." Right. They actually have Marty Schottenheimer as their defensive coordinator, who would go on to be a great coach with the Broncos and Browns and Chargers later on. But this team is pretty bad. They did play the Buccaneers, and they shut them out 10-0. But that would definitely be a high point of the year. They beat Washington 17-6. They beat the 49ers by a field goal. They beat the Cardinals, beating up a lot of teams that aren't very good. They actually swept Washington, actually. So they're the ones who probably kept Washington out of the playoffs, believe it or not. That's such an NFC East thing to happen. Their leading quarterback is a guy I've never heard of until this moment, a guy named Joe Pisarcik. I'm probably not even saying that correctly. And I don't know if you've looked up their stats, but how many touchdowns do you think this guy threw? He started 11 games for them.
Okay, I've looked up their stats, but I don't know. Based on what you're spitting at me, I'm going to go with 7.
You oversold it. He threw only 4 touchdowns the whole year and starting 11 games. Somehow he won 4 games. He won as many games as he threw touchdowns, which wasn't a lot, and he threw 14 interceptions. As a team, they threw 22 interceptions because they had a guy named Jerry Goldstein, who also started for them. As a team, they only completed 43% of their passes. On the ground, they were led by a guy named Bobby Hammond, who sounds like he would be selling you vehicles at a used car dealership. They somehow had Larry Zonka on their team, who that's a name that you probably know from the Miami Dolphins. A really bad team. They're not Buccaneers bad. They're not funny bad. But this is an interesting one. If I was the one on the other side of this pick, I would be very hard pressed to not pick the Giants, but it would be really funny to pick the Buccaneers. But honestly, the Giants are not selling me that if this game happened in late December after the Buccaneers were off the momentum of winning their last 2 games, hey, something crazy could happen. So I don't know how you feel about it.
Man, if it's the end of the season, okay, yeah, the Buccaneers pull off the upset. They were riding some momentum. But to be frank with you, the Giants, I think, were just a level above this Tampa Bay team this year. They were just, if we were doing a tier list, the Tampa Bay team would absolutely be F tier, if that's the lowest tier. And the Giants would be on the tier right above them. Whoever the Giants play next, I mean, they basically have a bye. It's as simple as that. My notes on the New York Giants is quite minimal, but one of them is literally talking about how there's a clip where one of the receivers got knocked the F out on a highlight reel, where they literally shows him get knocked out and then lay unconscious for like an uncomfortable amount of time. And I just thought that was fantastic. But the Giants will advance. My good sir, rest in peace to the Bucks, and I look forward till 1979.
Yeah, for sure. That's a little heartbreaking to know that we can't talk about the Buccaneers anymore. I want to know if during your research you found out anything interesting about the Buccaneers.
I mean, just that they were absolutely terrible. The worst part is my handwriting is so bad that when I look at it, I mean, you nailed the 5-game mark. That was mentioned in the highlight reels, that they averaged 6 points a game. And I do remember the game highlights in the last 2 weeks of the season were fantastic. But this team, to me, watching the videotape, they look like the Washington Generals going up against the Harlem Globetrotters. That's the only way I would describe them, and that to me sticks out in 1977 NFL football, is that it's just a little bit sloppier than we're used to, and the bad teams are worse than we can ever imagine in 2025.
Yeah, well said. Let's see what teams you get for your round. You're going to get the Baltimore Colts that they were at the time. One of the better teams of this season.
Damn good team.
Who will they face? They're going to get the Buffalo Bills.
Okay. Respectable matchup. I'm so glad that wasn't the Cowboys, because that would have been so unfair.
Yeah, that would have been a tough one.
To the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys would have prevailed. Spoiler alert. They're actually good this year. It's one of the few years that a Cowboys fan can look back on and not feel shame and misery. The Buffalo Bills, man, they were not good. 3-11 on the season. The Baltimore Colts, on the other hand, won the AFC East. They were the team that beat the Miami Dolphins and got that 10-4 record. To me, I had a funny realization that the quarterback for the Baltimore, his name is Burt Jones. He reminds me so much of C.J. Stroud. You know, C.J. had the amazing rookie season, and Jones, early on in his career, was like the MVP in 1986. So the hype was real that Jones is going to be the guy. And then the rest of his career was just like injuries, bad seasons. This was the first season after his MVP year. Jones still had the quality. He just, the rest of the team, the defense wasn't necessarily there. But Burt Jones is a pretty damn good quarterback this year offensively. That was a strong point of the Baltimore Colts. And Nate, I mean, the Buffalo Bills, they were a dumpster fire. Literally, it sucks to say, but the only bright spot of the Buffalo Bills was O.J. Simpson. And when O.J. Simpson is the one bright spot, you got a problem. The one funny thing is, offensively, they threw the ball a whole hell of a lot. Their quarterback, Joe Ferguson, led the league in passing yards, which is awesome. He also led the league in interceptions with 24. So the Bills they were a mess. And I think they were still kind of clinging on to just O.J. Simpson, and it wasn't working out. So, to me, this is an easy layup for the Baltimore Colts.
Yeah, pretty well said. I mean, O.J. Simpson only started 7 games in 1977. He's probably thinking about what he was going to do 16 years from this point. Probably had some big plans for himself. So he took some time off. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up that Joe Ferguson led the league both in passing yards and interceptions. Back then, they'd call that a gunslinger, right? Like someone who throws for a lot, who's just slinging the ball a lot. But somehow, it is quite remarkable to me how many of these guys could not complete more than 50% of their passes and stayed in the league as NFL quarterbacks, because this guy hit only 48.4%. And I know that there's some immense 1970s or immense Joe Ferguson fans out there who are like, well, that's when men were men and they didn't have those silly penalties like we have now. And like, sure, he was an NFL quarterback, but I think the bare minimum should be completing 50% of your passes, right? I don't think I'm crazy for suggesting that.
No, but also, like, people were just worse at football. Like we now have kids in quarterback camps 365 days a year taking a 3 and a 5 step drop. Like, we didn't have the same level of preparation. Like, Joe Ferguson was probably out drinking beer the entire week.
Probably during the game as well.
Probably during the game. Remembered like half the plays. His teammates probably put the same amount of work into it. Like, it took the league until Tom Brady for them to figure out, oh, you should work hard. So, players just sucked more back then. But the best players still stick out. Like, again, Walter Payton. You know, watching Tony Dorsett in his rookie year. The cream does rise to the top where you're like, damn, you know, John Elway, Roger Staubach, that works in any generation. Drew Pearson would find a starting spot on the Cowboys roster tomorrow. He wouldn't be wide receiver 1 because that's, you know, George Pickens if he re-signs. But, yeah, I mean, guys sucked at football in 1977. You know, freaking... Think of the biggest draft bust, and if you put Jamarcus Russell in 1977, is he a Hall of Famer? I don't know. Probably not. He probably throws picks anyway.
Yeah. So well said on all that. I think the Bills were definitely a bad team, though. On the Colts, you talked about Burt Jones. He did complete over 50% of his passes, 57 by the way. He led the league in completions, so we got 2 league leaders right here. But Burt Jones definitely, I think, would get the upper hand there. I want to talk about Lydell Mitchell, who was the running back on the Colts, on the Baltimore Colts back then. He rushed for 1,100 yards and actually led the league in receptions. So as a running back, he had 71 receptions, which led the league. Had 1,100 rushing yards too, so pretty dynamic player. And in the late 70s, in 3 years, from 75 to 77, he made the Pro Bowl all 3 years because he rushed for over 1,000 yards in all 3 of those seasons. But then after that, he had a contract dispute, and then demanded a trade. So they shipped him off to San Diego, and he was basically never heard from again. I mean, he rushed for 800 yards with the Chargers in 1978, and apparently he got a staph infection in 1979, which, like, basically sort of signaled the end of his career, because after 1980 he never played again. So pretty unfortunate. If he had just stuck around with the Colts, maybe he would have done some more damage.
There's a lot of stories of these NFL players going to the West Coast, kind of like thinking they're going to make it big. Like, I remember, if it's a wide receiver where he had glasses, maybe for the Packers or something, and he went to the Chargers, I think, and he ended up not doing too well either. But stories like that kind of happen where, especially the Chargers around that time, really messed up a lot of players, and, you know, that team has had a lot of bad luck even in recent years too. All right, so who do we got next? We're about to get a Cowboys-Chiefs matchup, bro.
Yeah, we're running out of teams here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one time you can make a good case. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's the Chiefs. Okay.
Oh boy. Patrick Mahomes. Was he on the Chiefs back then? And the Cleveland Browns.
Man, this is a crazy universe that you're about to walk us down. I'm
The
excited.
original Browns. The original Browns back when they were like the old guard of the NFL. They were this team that was like highly respected because they had this they played in Cleveland, right? And it was back when Cleveland, like as a city, I think was more respected than it is now. Definitely not the type of Browns that we think about nowadays. But yeah, so the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I wish they had played the Buccaneers because I wish we had matched them up against the Buccaneers because maybe this would have been a team that you thought the Buccaneers could move past. But yeah, they finished 2-12. They are one of the worst teams in the league this year. Yeah, they had the second worst scoring defense in the league, 27th out of the 28 teams, and 17th in scoring offense. So absolutely pitiful. They had 47 turnovers on the year, which is 26th in the league. They had just an absolutely awful team all around. They started off the year 0-5. They had big losses to the Chargers, big losses to the Broncos. They scored a lot of points against the Raiders, but gave up a lot of points as well. Their only wins on the year came against the Chargers in Week 6 on the road. They won 21-16, and then they beat the Packers later in the year 20-10. We've already talked about the Packers and how they were not a great team. They go on a 6-game losing streak to end the season, and they have a few close games, but honestly, they're kind of not in contention for a lot of stuff. They have a guy named Mike Livingston on their team, whose name really rings a bell to me because I feel like I've written his name down because he did something really ridiculous. He might have thrown like a lot of interceptions in a game or something, but his name really, I really am very, like I remember his name. Their coach, Tom Bettis, resigns midway through the year. He's replaced by a guy named Paul Wiggin. Both of them put in 1-6 records. Yeah, just a pretty bad team all around. They're led on the ground by a guy named Ed Podolak, who I can't believe is a running back. Just really nothing to talk about. I mean, one of the worst teams. If it wasn't for the Buccaneers, I think they would have been the worst team this season.
Nate, I found a rabbit hole. I found something interesting about this team. This is what this podcast is, you know. One of us goes full Rain Man, and we're like, this is interesting. So, one of the highlights I saw an interesting interception from a white defensive back named Mike Barbaro. And when I was looking at the stats right now, I noticed he actually led the league in interception yards. This was his second year in the league. He had 8 picks. And he was an interesting case where he ended up becoming a Pro Bowl safety. In 1980, he had 10 interceptions. He was Pro Bowl 80, 81, and 82. 7 years in the league, that's when his NFL career stops. What happened? Well, it was an NFL contract dispute. What do? You go to the other league. So this guy who was on the upswing maybe could have been a Hall of Fame safety, honestly, Nate, goes to the New Jersey Generals, I believe, which I don't know who their owner was at the time. I'm sure it wasn't Donald Trump, right? In 1984, was that the owner in 1984? Oh my gosh, yes. So this guy went to the team owned by Donald Trump, and he had one good season for the Generals, but then tore his ACL and had to medically retire. So there's the little thread I pulled on the really shitty Chiefs team.
Wow, that is tragic, and I'm glad that we have this show because I feel like there are so many players in NFL history that are just forgotten, and probably for good reason, right? I mean, he had a couple good years. I mean, why should we remember him? I doubt either of us can name a ton of Hall of Fame of defensive players who actually played 10 to 12 years and actually made the Hall of Fame, right? So. but I'm glad there's so many of these guys who have these crazy stories that I'm glad we're able to unearth. But the Chiefs, yeah, pretty bad. The Browns, meanwhile, not the worst team in the world. They actually played the Chiefs in Week 7 of the season and obliterated them 44-7 in Week 7, like I said. And that put their record at 5-2. So they were leading the AFC, their division at this point, the AFC Central. And then it all went horribly wrong. They lost 6 of their next 7 games. They lose to the Bengals, they lose to the Steelers, they lose to the Rams, they lose to the Chargers, the Oilers, and the Seahawks, and they finished 6-8. So after starting with a 5-2 record, they finished with a losing record, which is pretty crazy. And partially, I feel like it's to blame that their starting quarterback, Brian Sipe, only made it through 9 games that year. He suffered some injuries and didn't have the opportunity to kind of lead the team throughout the whole year. And they had a guy named Dave Mays and another guy named Terry Luck back him up, and neither of them were very good. In fact, Terry Luck, he only started 1 game, but he appeared in 4 games. And maybe they thought that because of his last name, something good would happen for him, but I guess they didn't realize that his middle name was bad because he threw 1 touchdown to 7 interceptions. He started 1 game in 1977 was the only year that he played in the NFL. So, and it was the last game of the year. So that was the game he started. So really unfortunate. They had a guy named Greg Pruitt who rushed for over 1,000 yards, made the Pro Bowl. He's pretty solid 70s running back for the Browns. And yeah, but other than that, not a lot to write off about. I think, obviously you can't change what was set in stone, but if the Browns could have gone back and maybe made a few adjustments and had to let things go a little bit their way, they probably would have been, I don't know if they would have made the playoffs, but they would have been right there contending for it. Either way, they're a heck of a lot better than the Chiefs, in my opinion.
I can't believe this Terry Luck guy has had only 1 game in his entire NFL career, and it's where he throws 7 interceptions. That is insane, bro. Like, talk about last day of work. You're like, if I had just not been put in this game, I could have totally signed a contract for next year. Oh my gosh. I want to watch the Terry Luck. I'm just trying to figure out if he signed anywhere in 1970.
Yeah, it's possible that he didn't have any stats, and he might have just stayed on the sideline. So I'm gonna look him up right now, actually.
I mean, that's just incredible, though. I mean,
okay, so he was on the Browns. This was actually his 2nd year. He was undrafted in 1976, and I guess never appeared. And then they were so pissed off by him in 1977, I guess, and just never called him back. And the only information on his Wikipedia, which
there's
again,
no reason he should have a Wikipedia.
This is me doing 8 seconds of research and only looking at Wikipedia, but he has literally 2 paragraphs, and one of them is that he's still alive and that he used to play for the Browns, and the second one is about where he used to go to the high school, and apparently he was inaugurated into the school's Hall of Fame in 2025, so literally last year it took him, when was he at this high school? In the early 1970s. It took him over 50 years to get into his high school's Hall of Fame, and he was an NFL player.
I'm looking at his LinkedIn right now. He's a retired advertising executive.
That is legitimately Terry Luck, the NFL quarterback.
I think we could probably get him on the podcast in one of his messages.
Does it say where he lived? Because it says he's from Fayetteville, North Carolina.
I'm not sure. It says the 3 C's of leadership. It shows a lot of gospel stuff. I mean, it might not be him, but it says he went to Nebraska.
Oh, yeah, that's where he went to college. That's where he played.
Yeah.
I learned that in my research right now. Wow, this picture is kind of crazy.
He's really milking this 7 interceptions thing. Like really, bro? You started 1 game and you're giving motivational speeches? Like, come on, bro. This is ridiculous. This LinkedIn page sucks too, bro. He's just reposting Tim Tebow quotes about, oh.
I'm gonna add him on LinkedIn. I wonder if he'll.
Yeah. Ask him why he never writes any posts. Everything's a repost.
Did he think he was the 1977 Tim Tebow?
I don't know.
Oh, it says he lives in Canton, Georgia. That's okay.
He's retired. Wow. I can't believe we went down to Terry Luck. Terry Luck is like the most likely NFL player we could ever interact with. I mean, he's retired. He's got a lot of free time. Maybe he could be like the third co-host.
I mean, all he does is post on LinkedIn. It seems like he has. I'm sure he was absolutely banking off of that contract that he signed in 1976.
I bet he loved that Bad Bunny concert.
Oh my god.
All right, so definitely have to put to death the Chiefs and the Browns advance, so we could talk about luck in the next round. What next two teams do we have?
Lucky for you, there are only 4 left, and one of them is the Dallas Cowboys, so we'll see what happens here. Oh, I think you're going to get them.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
You get the Cowboys.
All right.
And who do they get up against? Not a lot of good teams left here.
No.
The Bengals. Man, that's a little sad.
I'll let you say.
Yeah, I want you to defend the Bengals as hard as you can.
Yeah, I'll let you say a eulogy for the Bengals because I don't have much to say. Look, this is a Cowboys team that's going to advance to the finals. I think. I'm looking forward to making a case against them because I don't want them to win in this tournament. But this Cowboys team just got better and better as the season went along. They started off with like, hey, the one thing we needed is a running back, so we drafted Tony Dorsett, and we need this to work to, advance in the postseason, win the Super Bowl. And Dorsett was kind of rocky the first 2 games, but week 3, week 4, he started to show you the Hall of Fame running back he was going to be. And that's just the offensive side of the ball. We'll get to some of the other positions in the next round. Defensively, they were actually kind of an average team with the advanced statistics, but, bro, this is Cowboys defense with so many great characters. I mean, Randy White is such a badass, and my favorite player on this particular defense is absolutely Hollywood Henderson, who's an absolute maniac. He is worth, an entire 13th take episode for everything he's done. He was just, I didn't write down any of the stories, but it's like, out of his mind type stuff. My favorite fun fact about the Cowboys at this point was Ed Too Tall Jones left the league to pursue a career in boxing, and then he just came back and was a Cowboy again. I kind of love that. So, the Cowboys are clearly better than the Bengals. The Bengals had a good season. They were 8-6. They have a good quarterback in Ken Anderson, who's probably a top 3 Bengals quarterback of all time. But you put him in a single game playoff situation, they don't beat this Cowboys team. Nate, put the Bengals to rest. Empty out the clipboard. What do you got on them?
Man, if the Bengals had gone up against just about any other team, I would have loved to put them to the next round. They're one of those teams where, again, when I look at the old NFL, I get upset that we didn't have more teams in the playoffs because this team definitely would have made it. They came just about a hair, just a whisker away from taking the division crown from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, they lost their away game earlier in the year on Monday Night Football to them 20-14, but later beat them at home. They finish 8-6. They lose a very close game to the Oilers, and that kind of crushes their playoff hopes from there. And also, I don't think they had as good of a division record as the Steelers, so they probably wouldn't have made it anyway. But Ken Anderson, man, I am such a huge Ken Anderson fan. He was one of the first quarterbacks put in Bill Walsh's offense. Actually, I want to make sure that I'm not saying that wrong. I know Bill Walsh was on the Bengals. I'm not entirely sure if they crossed over. Yeah, 1975 Bengals. Yeah. So Ken Anderson was there. Ken Anderson, I can't understate how much this guy's one of the more underrated quarterbacks in NFL history to me. Like when you think of the Bengals quarterbacks, I think a lot of people are like, oh, Boomer Esiason. I'm sure you hear on the street all the time people championing Boomer Esiason. But to me, Ken Anderson is like that guy for the Bengals. I know we got Joe Burrow now, and glad he's there to represent the Cincinnati name. But Ken Anderson's definitely an underrated guy, and wish he would get more credit. But a couple things I want to talk about that aren't Ken Anderson on the Bengals is Bill Johnson. He's the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. His nickname is Tiger, which it was prophetic that he would later end up being the Cincinnati Bengals head coach. And one thing about Bill Johnson is he had a winning record with the team the year before this, in his first year with the team, and he had a winning year this year. But then the next year they start 0-5, and he just flat out resigns because he says, I'm not good enough, which is so sad. And then he never coaches he's never a head coach in the NFL ever again. And and he's one of only 3, which I'm honestly surprised there's even 3 of these, but he's one of only 3 coaches in Bengals history to have a winning record in across their career as their head coach.
That's hilarious.
And then there's also a guy on their team, another quarterback, the only other one to start a game this year for them. He's a guy named John Reeves, who is one of the worst quarterbacks, I think, to ever play in the NFL. He started a game, and I know I said I was going to save this for when I talked about the Oilers, but I'll just give a hint of it because it's the game that the Bengals played against the Oilers. But John Reeves started this game because Ken Anderson was hurt, and he was so bad that Ken Anderson, with an injury that kept him from starting at the game, had to come into the game in the second half and led the Bengals to a win in overtime. Ken Reeves was so bad, he went 5 of 13 for 69 yards and threw 2 interceptions in that game, and that was the only game he started that year. Somehow, and I need I remind you that in his rookie year of 1972 with the Philadelphia Eagles, John Reeves didn't exactly make a great first impression. He started 7 games in his rookie year with the Eagles after being drafted in the first round. So he's like a top prospect. He's supposed to be a great guy. He goes 0-7. He loses all 7 games that he starts for them. Completes again under 50% of his passes, 48%. There's 7 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And the crazy thing to me, he later he's backup quarterback for the Bengals for a while. After that, his rookie year, after he's drafted first round and he loses all 7 games, he never starts another game for the Eagles. Then he's career backup for the Bengals. And then he somehow is a backup for the Oilers for one season in 1981. And then his career's over. And then in 1987, he comes back. At the age of 37, he comes back into the NFL and starts 2 games for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which to me is just absolutely crazy. Somehow he wins one of those games. But John Reeves, I think, one of the crazier stories that I've ever found while researching the NFL and while researching this season, certainly.
Wow.
But sort of
I still think Terry Luck is worse than him.
I think so. I think if we put them in a quarterback duel together, one of them would have to.
Terry would shit his pants. Terry would just shit his pants, and Reeves would be like, "Oh, I know what it's like to suck ass. I can do this comfortably. I can do 50 snaps of just bad football. I've been there, done that, kid." The gap is crazy to me. The only explanation is similar to the Phillip Rivers situation, where they needed a quarterback and he knew the offense from that offensive coordinator. So maybe the OC knew that Reeves knew the offense and they were short a quarterback. That's the only reason that makes sense for why he got that opportunity.
Sure. So it's a little more complex than that. As you mentioned, I forget the name of the Chiefs player you were talking about earlier, but he went off to the USFL. Reeves also went off to the USFL in 1983 when it was just starting up. So this was 2 years after he was with the Oilers, and played there for a couple years. It was pretty decent with them, but of course the league folded and didn't exist anymore. And then in 1987, you have the NFL players strike, where you have these 3 weeks where literally they're picking up people off the street, and Reeves just happened to be one of them. At 37 years old, he comes and comes in and somehow wins a game for the for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is more than a lot of people can say. And by a lot of people, I mean a lot of Buccaneers quarterbacks cannot say that they've won games. Somehow, though, this is crazy, though. He started 2 games, right? I said that. He completed only 6 passes in those 2 games. And he won one of those games.
That's insane. They literally were like, you do not pass the ball unless we absolutely have to. I mean, that's a fantastic story. And
somehow we were talking about Cowboys versus Bengals.
Well, I guess just to wrap up the Bengals and say goodbye, because it is goodbye to them, I think, unless you swerve me and pick Cincinnati.
That's just about it.
But here's what makes Ken Anderson so good. This dude played in the league for just one team, 16 years, 1971 to 1986, for the Cincinnati Bengals, who are like a perpetually cursed and just generally bad franchise. He left them with a record 10 games above 500. The ability to do that, give that to the Bengals fans, like, hey, an average season of above 500 over a decade and a half, that's a Hall of Fame quarterback if I've ever heard of one.
Yeah, for sure. I gotta ask, are you a fan of the wrestler Ken Anderson?
He's okay. He was supposed to be the next Stone Cold Steve Austin because he was a good promo, but he was just missing something. He got heat by working stiff with some of the WWE guys, and so yeah. But he was definitely like somebody who, he's like a Des Bryant. Like, you thought the career was going to be a lot better.
Or like a Terry Luck.
Or a Terry Luck, absolutely.
All right. Well, we are down, I think, to the last 2 teams.
Okay.
I think just for tradition, I will spin the wheel anyway.
Okay. As is tradition.
So, who am I gonna get? We're gonna get the Arizona, or at the St. Louis Cardinals at the time, actually. Big.
Okay,
red.
I have to steal your thunder.
Okay.
This is the most funniest thing ever.
Go ahead.
I think you know where I'm going with this. Who do you think was the worst team this year in the NFL?
Probably the Buccaneers. But honestly, the Saints they're you know.
Hey, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, clearly the worst team. They had 2 wins. The 2 wins they had were over the Saints and the Cardinals.
Wow. This is the matchup.
Yeah, this is it, bro. Hell yeah. All right, spit those facts.
Ooh, all right. Well, the New Orleans Saints, coached by the great Hank Stram, who probably thought, what in the world have I gotten myself into? He won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs just less than a decade before this. But he's here with the Saints team that cannot get out of its own way, cannot muster any kind of production. Somehow they win 3 games. 2 of those are by a single point. The other one, they obliterated the playoff team, the Chicago Bears, on the road. They went into Soldier Field and beat them 42-24. So this team clearly had some sort of talent. I think you can give a lot of that to Archie Manning. For years and years, he was the New Orleans Saints quarterback and did all that he could to push their ship afloat, to no avail, because they never made the playoffs during his tenure. They also had a quarterback by the name of Bobby Scott, and somehow Bobby Douglas was on this team, which when you're talking about teams with horrible quarterback horrible quarterback like legacies, like we were talking about the Lions earlier, this guy is probably top 5, probably maybe top 10 Bears quarterback of all time. And here he was near the tail end of his career with the New Orleans Saints. I actually caught a game or caught some highlights when he was their quarterback starting for them, and I thought, what the heck is going on? Why is Bobby Douglas starting for this team? But yeah, so they had a guy named Chuck Muncie, wasn't too bad, rushed for over 800 yards. Defensive side of the ball, nothing really to write about. No Pro Bowlers, I think, on their entire team. So really a forgettable team, one of the worst, certainly this year, maybe the worst. They do have a quarterback coach who I think in NFL history, this guy has like the best name of all time. His name is Dick Wood. He was a player, actually. He played for the Patriots, I believe. He was a quarterback for them. Looks like he played for a lot of teams, but I've seen a football card of him that just says Dick Wood, and I've always thought that was just absolutely amazing. That's this guy that's his name. So that's really all I have to say. About the Saints is Dick Wood, quarterback coach, and meanwhile the St. Louis Cardinals. I think you could pick this Cardinals team. You could pick any Cardinals team out of a hat. St. Louis, Arizona, Chicago, whichever era you want. Phoenix, and they're all the same. They don't matter. Nothing they did ever mattered. I actually looked this up one time and was going to text it to you, but then I thought maybe it's not as ridiculous or impressive as I thought. But the Harlingen Cardinals, the school that we went to, has more wins in its history as a football team than the NFL Cardinals do. And keep in mind, the NFL Cardinals have existed since before the NFL existed. So since 1920, and I'm forgetting the exact year that the Harlingen Cardinals started football, but I think it was like 1925 or something, maybe 1928. And they didn't play during the World War II or something, I don't know. But they have more wins. A high school team that plays like 8 or 10 games a year has more wins than the NFL team does. So glad I got to bring that up.
Unbelievable. I mean, like, it's easier to dominate at a high school. Like, I'm sure, you could go 14-0 every year for like 40 years if you're awesome at Westlake. But still, I mean, with the advantage of the years, they played more games. Like, the Harlingen Cardinals weren't always great either. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, regardless, in this specific matchup, the Cardinals, I do got to say they have the upper edge. They have Jim Hart, who it would be between him and Neil Lomax for best Cardinals quarterback in history. I know Kurt Warner took him to a Super Bowl, but he was only there like 2 years, 3, 4 years, right? Which I know is like a stupid opinion to have, to pick a guy no one's heard of like Jim Hart over Kurt Warner, who's literally in the Hall of Fame. But Jim Hart played there for like decades. Like he was with the Cardinals for such a long time, and one of the more reliable guys. Never really took him to any postseason success, but he was a Cardinals quarterback. There's not a lot you can do. They actually start the year off 7-3. They're a pretty decent team, and then sort of like we heard about with the Browns, it all came crashing down in the last few games of the year. And I will say that they deserved it because I guess it's not their fault, but the NFL thought it was a good idea to let them host a Thanksgiving game instead of the Dallas Cowboys. So they host the Miami Dolphins and get creamed 55-14. And then they lose to the Giants the following week. They lose to Washington, and then they lose to Tampa Bay. They lose to the Buccaneers. They're only the second team ever. And I think these are probably the two most fitting franchises to hand Tampa Bay their first two wins. So that being said, I don't really love either of these teams, but it's probably pretty clear who the winner is. I mean, they played early in the season. They played in Week 6, and the Cardinals won 49-31.
Yeah, I mean, for the love of God, let's at least honor Jim Hart, who you blew my mind that you can make a realistic case that he's the best Cardinals quarterback. It basically comes down to, do you value 3 years of peak performance versus the guy who holds all the passing yards records? You know, he has all of the records in terms of career as a Cardinal, career passing touchdowns. And also, if you prefer the peak, you would probably put Kurt Warner along with Carson Palmer, who had a couple of good years to the Cardinals. But with that being said, if you told me Jim Hart's the best Cardinal quarterback of all time, you actually have a damn good case to make, Nathaniel. So it would be stupid as hell to have him get eliminated by the Saints here. It seemed like Arch Manning had just shit luck, man. I mean, it just seemed like he was trying his best to make things happen, and his teammates were failing him. One interesting note is we don't talk much offensive line. They are the most forgotten players in football, other than maybe long snapper, and then you start seeing what their favorite charities are, then you have questions. But Dan Deerdorf was a hell of a tackle, and he was a tackle on the St. Louis Cardinals, so let's go. Cardinal spirit never dies.
Heck yeah, that is a very underrated player to bring up, Dan Deerdorf. I know we've mentioned a few guys here who later were on Monday Night Football, and he certainly is one as well. And we will get the Seattle Seahawks, who I just tried to kick off of our list to no avail. They're still here. And who are they going to face? The Dallas Cowboys.
Okay. I will.
After waiting all of round one to hear about the Cowboys, we now get to hear about them right away.
I think this is going to be hilarious if we go the entire game and you never get an opportunity to talk about a Cowboys team that won a Super Bowl. But Nate, you do not get this opportunity in round two because it's my turn. And look, the Seattle Seahawks had no business advancing to round two. They were an absolute shit team. They were just the best of the shit teams. And I don't even know what their matchup was. You literally had them crossed off. They played the Packers. Yeah, you had them crossed off. And, that's just typical Nate, trying to influence elections and whatnot. But no, the Seahawks team was literally just Jim Zorn was the one good thing about the Seahawks team. He flung the ball in the air, led the league in yards per completion at 16.2. Young quarterback, underrated quarterback, no match for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, a player I didn't talk about in round one was the safety Charlie Waters. The way it's described is, he was like a pariah because of how poorly he was doing as a defensive back, ultimately kind of figuring things out and then becoming one of the leaders as a safety for the Cowboys. And, Randy White is a name you remember, Too Tall Jones, but Charlie Waters is that next level of Cowboys legend that's worth remembering, but maybe not asking about his opinion on the Bad Bunny show. So I rest my case.
Yeah, well said. I think it's a pretty easy one. I mean, we heard a lot about these teams in the first round, and I mean, if they were going to match up, which they did in the year before this, 1976, and the Cowboys went easily. So, no doubt in my mind, this Cowboys team was just absolutely stacked, and it's a little easier back then because you didn't have like the free agency or the cap space problems like we do nowadays, which is why Jerry Jones can never win a damn Super Bowl because he doesn't know how to do things correctly. But back then, none of that mattered. They were able to succeed very well. Whereas the Seahawks, very much still growing. Their lead guy, like you said, Jim Zorn, I think to summarize this whole thing, I mean, he was on the Seahawks because he wasn't even good enough to make the Cowboys roster. So they're like literally the second best players on this roster. It's what they're made up of, and that's no real slight to Jim Zorn. You know, I'm a big fan of big old Jay-Z.
No, that sounds like you slighted the hell out of him. What are you talking about? You just talked massive shit, and you were like, no disrespect, but you're a second stringer. No, if he's watching this show, he's pissed at you. There's no massaging your criticism.
Well, if I was Jim Zorn, I'd be more embarrassed by the fact of how I coached Washington in 2009 than I would be about how I played as a player. No, like he was, well, he might not have been good enough for the 70s Cowboys. He was good enough for the 70s Seahawks, and that's pretty good. He later actually was third in MVP voting literally the year after this, and made the All-Pro team 2 years after this. So, pretty solid player later on in his career, but at this point, still looking for that next level stuff. But to me, I definitely got to pick the Cowboys here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cowboys, first team to advance to round 3, where one of the 7 teams will get a bye. So, we will experience a bye in round 3. But let's see who are the first 2 teams Nathaniel will fight for. Who's it going to be? Vikings, okay.
Well, this is where it goes from like comical to like actually having to think about this, depending on who they go up against.
There aren't too many cupcakes left. Oh, damn, we got a good matchup either way. Okay.
Okay, this is 2 teams who obviously are in the same division. Back then, it's the NFC Central that these 2 teams are in. The Vikings win this division. Both teams finished with a 9-5 record, but the Vikings make it past by virtue of their divisional record. They played each other twice in the regular season. Obviously, they beat the Bears in overtime early in the year, and then later in the year lost to them, 10-7. They don't play. They didn't actually play in the postseason. I believe they were supposed to. If I'm trying to get that wrong, no, they weren't, because the Cowboys were the top seed. Because back then the NFL, I think in the AFC, this problem happened. This stupid thing that the NFL used to do, where if 2 teams were in the same division, they couldn't play each other in the divisional round for some reason. The MLB actually did that as well around this time, and it's absolutely mind-blowing to me that was a rule. But, yeah, I mean, the Vikings, a very solid team. They have some future Hall of Famers on there. They got Fran Tarkenton,